So, welcome to the revived London show here in Kenton. I'm Sprowson. I'm here representing RISC OS Open today. So I'm going to go through some of the things that have been released to coincide with the show, a few bits and pieces for what developers might be interested in, and a few more user-oriented things, because I can never quite guess what mixture of people will be in the audience. So I have done a talk where it's entirely development-based, and I could see that 2 or 3 people on the front row fell asleep. So I've been keeping an eye on people's eyeballs, watching who's following me. So, things for the show. So the first thing I can talk about is RISC OS Lion, which is a slightly obtuse reference that you'll come to in a second. So when we were working towards the latest stable release, RISC OS 5.30, there were a set of red, amber, green traffic lights monitoring progress of each of the 9 different ports that RISC OS runs on. And one of those that achieved its green traffic light was the OMAP5, which is a type of processor made by Texas Instruments. And then obviously there was lots of other bug fixes in general to do with the OS, not specifically hardware related, and then various extra new features and other fixes to the disk image. But the main thing to focus on there on that slide is that the OMAP5 is a type of processor made by Texas Instruments. That's the only piece of information you need to remember. What is an OMAP5? So it's a Cortex A15 processor that runs 1.5 gigahertz, and depending on which board you find that chip soldered, there's either 2 gigabytes or 4 gigabytes of RAM, a SATA port, and the SATA port on that one's in the back, so you can't see it, Ethernet socket obviously, USB, all the usual sorts of things you'd expect. They also have eMMC, which is like a solid-state hard disk that sits on the SD bus, as opposed to a SATA hard disk. So you have both. Several drive icons on the icon bar. And in practical terms, if you want to buy one of these, they're available in DigiKey. They're about £250. They take 2 days to arrive. I bought one at home. They work fine. And the iJet 5, I can't find a store that still sells those online, other than our good friends at CJ Micro. So you must have a warehouse somewhere extending off the south coast where he's got all his stock hidden. So CJ Micro is for an iJet 5, and DigiKey sell the one on the left. So previously what we've done with the Panda board and the Beagle board, this is where the Lion part comes in, the Panda board and Beagle board, in order to be able to continue to support these going forward in the future, we've dug out the source code, and in some cases that had been lost several times, to the little bootloader that gets loaded first before RISC OS starts. So when you first boot the card up, it goes and looks for a bootloader in a special place on the micro SD card, and then boots RISC OS from that. Yes, for several of the Panda board, Beagle board, and the OMAP family, tracking down the source code, that was a bit tricky, so that has been done and now stored in, read the exception on address gitlab.riscosopen.org/RISC-OS utilities boot loaders. So if ever whoever it was that created the original gets struck by lightning, don't worry, you can just go to that website and get the source code back from there. If you want to make, I should say, yeah, the Lion micro SD card is pulling together the stable release OS ROM, the standard disk image with a few bundled applications like NetSurf. But other than that, it is all things that you can, if you wanted to, put together yourself. So there's a new version of SD Create that's going to be coming out in the next week or 2, so that you can, if you wanted to, put all these bits together on your own micro SD card. So, as with the Panda board and Beagle board, this is very much a longevity of support, keeping things going when the original vendors have stopped making the respective hardware. So it's a way to preserve these going forwards if you've got one of these machines. If not, go buy one from DigiKey or CJ Micros. So that's RISC OS Lion, new micro SD card out today on the stand. Oops, got the wrong way. Also today, we've released a new edition of the Style Guide, which I did remember to bring a copy to wave around. So this was first updated by RISC OS Open anyway, in February 2015, which is a disturbing 9 years ago. Seems to have passed quicker than I remember. So this new edition has some features in it. For example, it's got information on using a tree gadget. I'm just going to quickly look for that picture. Somewhere in here. There we go. So yeah, the tree gadget, which is a bit like, if you use Windows, it's a bit like the Windows Explorer view, where each level you click expands the next level down. So I'll randomly pass that around the room. If you just have a flick and pass it in a zigzag fashion around the room. So this has all been updated today, and if you have a registered developer number beginning with Devo 7, there's also a 20% discount. Obviously there'll be a PDF bundled, once we've made a PDF at the moment, there's a printed copy that we bought today. And the objective here, looking at sort of the bigger picture, is RISC OS Open wants to refresh all of the main book titles that at one point Acorn had done. So Style Guide is done. In fact, Style Guide has been done twice. The BBC Basic Reference Manual has been done. User Guide, the desktop development environment, which is the assembler, compiler, and other tools. I'm sure there's another one. I feel like I've missed the book out here. ABC, thank you. Yes, ABC compiler. Yeah. And then the ones that I think are still on the shopping list are the Toolbox manual. There is a bounty underway at the moment to work on the code half of that. So I think the expectation is once that code is finished, there'll be a finished book of the Toolbox manual. There are some drafts available if you have a desktop development environment. There's a PDF shipped on that. And also the biggie, there's only 3 letters, PRM, but it's actually nearly 5,000 pages. It's so updating each of these books takes of the order of something like the Style Guide is like 100 hours kind of time frame. The thicker ones maybe 200 hours. So yes, it scales, I'm sure, linearly. The PRMs is many months of hard work to update that. So that is also underway under the guise of a bounty, because at the moment various chapters of the PRM are scattered all over the place. There's the extra book that got added for the RISC PC, but that's not integrated with the first book. So if you read the first book, you then have to go and look in another book for the answer. It's a very strange arrangement. So an initial step, for the PRMs at least, is to mash all of that text back together into one book rather than having to look in several places. The other thing that I have brought with me, and it's on the stand today, is an updated RISC OS 5 user guide. So this gets updated for each of the stable releases. There's a wiki page on the RISC OS Open website where if you spotted a typo, you can submit corrections. And if there's a new application added, for example, like when SparkFS was made open source, that text is now in here. So the chapter that used to be about the SparkFS read-only chapter is now turned into a read-write chapter. So I'm going to pass that one left-hand way around the room. That was a bit heavier, sorry. Hopefully, that will zigzag its way back to the beginning. So, new Style Guide out on the stand today. We spoke just a second ago about SparkFS. So, even though David Pilling has done his very best to retire, he still gets emails from RISC OS Open saying, wouldn't it be nice if we had this feature? So, initially, last February, so that must be a year and a bit ago, David open sourced SparkFS, which I guess most of us use for managing zip files, but it has a lot of other compressors for CPIO and LZW, all the other different compression types, which did involve raking over 52,000 lines of code, because some of it was not all written by David, so you have to then go and find who the copyright holder was originally and contact the copyright holder to check if it's okay. The most amusing story I remember from that was a guy who, unfortunately, he had died in the intervening period, who wrote one of the compressors for, I think it was Arch, I think that's right. But we managed to get in contact with the office that he did it, fortunately, under the guise of his academic, his university work. So we were able to contact the university in the Netherlands, and they were kind enough to, yes, they were happy to grant it as an open source project as well. So that was the last of the compressors that we were stuck on from when David Billing handed it over. Anyway, back to the storyline. So the most recent edition, SparkFS 1.57, that's available on the RISC OS Open downloads page, adds support for what are known as streamed zips, which you might not ever have been aware that you have used a streamed zip. They're sometimes called zips with data headers. It's basically if you go to a website where the thing that you're downloading does not yet exist, the zip will be generated on the fly. So if, for example, I don't know, you were watching BBC News and you wanted that news report and downloaded it straight away, the chances are there isn't a server somewhere that already has that zip file sitting waiting for you to download. When you click the download button, the zip will be generated on the fly by converting the data in real time. But the way that zips work is they have a header at the beginning, then all the data. So there's obviously a problem there that if you want to generate it on the fly, you have to transmit the header before you send all the data. And that's the problem that you have with a streamed zip, is you don't know at the beginning of the file how big the rest of the file is going to be until you've received it all. So there's a special variant of zip files where instead of having the header at the beginning, they append it at the bottom. And that was something that SparkFS couldn't previously handle, and it does now, which is great. So beyond streamed zips, because with streamed zips, if you downloaded one that was streamed, it would simply not work. If you double-clicked on it, it wouldn't open. It would say it had a bad header. So that has unlocked another subset of zip files. But future things that are equally useful happening in SparkFS, the ability to rename files within a zip feels like a really useful feature. I know I can do it on Windows, so that should be coming along to the RISC OS version not too soon. And sort of related to the streamed zips was some work that David did on zip cryptography, so you can password protect zip files as well. And the password protection isn't sort of NASA grade compression technology, so they can now be cracked, but the practical use of zip crypto is if you're finding that you're emailing a program to someone, often their spam filter will say, oh, hang on, you're sending me a program attachment to your email, and they'll throw it away. So often what people will do will just password protect that to allow it to get through email systems. So it has a practical use, even if the cryptography nowadays isn't as strong as it could be. And a few other ideas just thrown into the mix there, supporting other decompression types. RAR files are reasonably common, and it always feels a bit sad that you have to wait when you're zipping up a large chunk of data when there are potentially 2 or 4 ARM cores sitting twiddling their thumb on your computer. So there's some possibility there that you could farm out some of the compression work, but that's definitely far future stuff. I think focus more on the renaming zip and the crypto for now. Okay, this is the bit where anyone who's not a developer, you can go to sleep for a moment. I will clap my hands when I've finished. So in September, so this is prior to the show, a new version of the desktop development environment was released. So that was DD31E, which, in case you don't understand the weird numbering and lettering scheme, basically the number part goes up when something significant happens. So, for example, when the ABC compiler got support for generating vector floating point maths, the major version number jumped up, and then the letter just gets tacked on the end when there's minor patches and fixes. So this was very much a minor patches and fixes on top of DD31D. You see D compiles D. So fixing some problems with the C compiler where there were some weird uses of structures and unions, which is a way of laying out data in memory that used to trip up the compiler, so it now gets those right. There's some fixes to the debugger, because if you had a file name that was really long, like you had if you were trying to debug something that was nested quite deeply in the directory structure, there were some dialog boxes that were a bit limited in the DDT, the desktop debugger, where yes, that would cause that to crash. So it was a bit embarrassing when the debugger crashes. Kind of a paradoxical, how do I debug that problem? Well, you'd use the debugger, obviously. There's some updates to the SID disassembler, which is an interactive disassembler for turning modules typically back into their original source code if you've lost the source code. A few updates to CMHG, which is the module header generator if you're writing things in C. And these again, because as you can tell from going from D to E, these are all relatively minor things. There are no big earthquakes in any of these things. And then some refreshes to the PDF copies of the manuals to reflect the changes that have happened in the tools since the last set. So they were kind of 3 years worth of typos and other additions to the manuals. And because they're all PDFs, given as PDFs, you can actually click across manuals. So if there's a thing that says please see page 4 in this manual over here, and you click on that in the PDF view of RISC OS, it will jump to the other book on the respective page. Quite clever. This is the, I promise for developers, this is the second of 2 slides, so everyone can stay asleep for a few more moments. This is the more general terms, what's happening with the desktop development environment going forwards. These first 3 bullet points, there was no magic there. That's on the FAQ on the RISC OS Open website, so I'm not telling you anything exciting or new there. The way that the tools are built internally, there's a thing that knows what language you're writing in, and most often that's C in RISC OS. And then there's a bit that is language independent that does all the optimization, and then there's the bit that outputs ARM code at the back. So there's the front end, usually called the middle end, and then the back end. So it's divided into 3 slices. So we are aware, other language front ends available that were written previously when ARM were using these tools, other than C, which is the one that we're most familiar with. And then later this year, and they're running out of time because it's October, so the next C standard is due to be ratified by the International Standards Organization. And to be fair to C, it is evolving over time. It's not the banging rocks together and carrying pieces of wood manually that it was in C99, for example. The newer standards are both relaxing what you can do and being generally more helpful. So, for example, they've added support for multi-threading. That is now a part of the language. So, whereas you couldn't previously have done that without writing your own library. So there's a lot less bringing your own bricks to the building site. A lot more of it is built into the language. And then, yes, I mentioned a moment ago that there's a front end, a middle end, and a back end. So other logical back ends to add are ones that output vector floating points for fast floating point calculations, because at the moment we use just the floating point emulator. And depending on how good your eyesight is, generating 64-bit ARM codes. That's a Hello World program. Yeah, my eyesight is not that good. 64-bit Hello World program being generated by just changing the back end on the tools. Back grounded in reality, yeah, I mentioned other language front ends. So one of the things that has happened in the last year or 2 is a negotiation with ARM to make use of their C++ front end. Currently, the desktop development environment ships with something called C front, which is from about 1993-ish, and it's terrible. Everyone hates it, but it still ships, so hey ho. So yeah, the idea is to take that out into the backyard and shoot it, because it's terrible. It is terrible, and replace it with something that is standardized. So the problem with C front is it was like an experimental compiler written by I forgot his surname, Sprowson, I think. That was, yeah, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that. Bjorn, anyway. And that was pre the standardization in C++ 98, so it's got a lot of things that look very C++y, but to a modern programmer they would look very alien. Yeah, the idea is to stitch that onto the contemporary REST compiler and get a vaguely good C++ one. And there's some behind-the-scenes work that has been sneaked in, probably without most people noticing. The shared C library that's in the latest stable release of RISC OS knows about constructors and destructors, which if you're a C++ programmer tells you what you need to hear. And then, yeah, I get also on the quiet the function name unmangler, and that is a real word, I checked in the dictionary. The C++ symbol unmangler in both DDT and DECAOF, the disassembler, have been replaced with the ones that match the ARM, the ones from ARM. So there's bits of work going on behind the scenes, and I'm hoping, yeah, that's getting close to the point where we'll have something useful. Okay, so I should probably clap now because that is the end of the developer boredom. This is back to people actually using the computers, something for everyone. So I'm aware, and as is Steve Revel, the CEO of RISC OS Open, because he wrote this page, I was looking at the wiki page. That is Steve's most concise instructions on how to upgrade RISC OS. And as you can see, it spans to, it's only 4 points, only 4 bullet points, it's nice and easy. However, the bullet points have sub-bullet points, and those have sub-sub-bullet points, some of which are loops. You read the instructions, you think, oh, I'm halfway through. It says, no, go back to step 1, do it again. And yeah, it is fair to say that upgrading RISC OS 5 is quite a torturous, hair-pulling experience. Because you find that there are dependencies and that people love messing about inside their boot sequence. And the result of that is one of two things. Either you end up with a cliff edge, so nobody upgrades, suddenly they upgrade and then find a load of problems. Or they're missing out on some important new features or some important new security updates. And that's particularly important if, for example, you're using something that has Acorn SSL, doing the security backend to send data to your bank or something like that. Sometimes there are important security patches that you might be missing out on because you're sitting waiting for the cliff edge. So part of the solution to this is, if you like Pac-Man, all of the applications that live outside the boot sequence are now on Pac-Man. So you can just let Pac-Man do its thing, keeping your disk image up to date. But you can do it manually if you prefer. I'm not that bothered. It's not core OS, so if you want to open zip files and manually update, that works fine too. So all Pac-Man really is a pile of zip files. There's nothing overly magic about it. So if you prefer to download the zip files by hand and open them, that's fine. But managing the boot sequence is definitely more tricky because you've got all of these dependencies on, if I want this resource here, I need that module there, and it only works if these two modules have the same version number, and all that sort of thing. So yeah, at the moment, the best sort of sticking plaster solution to that when there's a new major OS release is there's a little obey file called in situ update, and it'll have a go at updating your disk image. If it encounters anything even vaguely non-standard, it will generally trip up because it only has the intelligence of an obey file. There's no sort of decision logic that it can follow through. It just has its best go at updating all the files, but it can still fall over if you find something unusual. And if I look on every other OS that I've encountered, be that Linux, macOS, Windows, they all have some kind of rolling update that goes on in the background. So that seems like a sensible way for RISC OS to follow. Don't try inventing too many new wheels. And there'd be a sliding scale there, because obviously if you've deployed this computer in some weird high-to-reach place that you need to get a step ladder to go and update, you probably don't want it to run the possibility that it will fail on an update. So maybe you wanted to select the only when I say so button, so that only when you get your step ladder out and go and look at that computer, you can review what updates it's going to apply, or the opposite end of the extreme is just leave RISC OS to go and keep itself up to date. Honestly, we've probably all seen the news stories when some virus software that was updated about 2 months ago caused all the airlines in the US to fall on their face because the virus software misclassified something and deleted half of Windows. So yeah, you probably, hopefully that sort of serious outcome, because RISC OS is essentially still a ROM-based OS. Hopefully that's not quite as prone to downing US airlines, but yeah, people may wish to take something along the sliding scale rather than letting it all be automated. And there's some little bits of eye candy on the shopping list for the next stable release of RISC OS. You've probably seen when you're logging into a website like eBay or something like that, it will have a little eyeball tote next to your password, so that if you've typed and you think, hang on, did I press the letter K there? I can't remember. If you click on the little eyeball tote, it will temporarily reveal your password so you can see whether you pressed the letter K or not. I have to change my passwords now, I've just told everyone. Anyway, so yeah, it's a little creature comfort there, because internally the window manager does know exactly what characters you have typed. It's just displaying them as hyphens for privacy reasons. But yes, if you were to click on the little eyeball tote, that would reveal what you had typed. Also in the window manager, and again this is copying where other OSs have had the lead. When I click on various things, close a window, you hear little sounds when you close the window, or similarly when they maximise, there'll be whatever the opposite sound is. And also, yeah, it's most useful for me when I'm rummaging under the desk trying to find the USB memory stick that I just dropped on the floor, is hearing that sound when you plug a new USB device in or unplug it. You get the din, din, din. So these are. Actually, I could probably record that and just use that verbatim. Think of the royalty payments I'll get. So yes, having things, there are a number of events that happen in the window manager already, and they already go round as window manager messages, but nothing is acting on them. So having a module that sits in the background with a little stockpile of sound effects to play back seems like a nice addition. Obviously, I'm pointing carefully at the word optional there. Some of them are super annoying and you want to turn those off, but in my use case, dropping memory sticks on the floor is quite common, so I would definitely want the new USB device plugged in, the sound effect turned on. I probably wouldn't want the you mistyped your password sound effect turned on. Continuing on the theme of the window manager, so in the last stable release, RISC OS 5.30, the window manager gained the ability to have a different sprite used as the background for the icon bar, and so that's how you can do little tricks like making it look transparent. It's not really transparent, it's just a sleight of hand where the backdrop tile has been replaced by a shaded version of the desktop tile, sorry, the desktop background. So yeah, it's a little sleight of hand, but there's a logical extension to that. For example, when I sit watching people using RISC OS who don't normally use it, when I go to an office and show it to someone, they say, "What on earth are you using this for?" They will find it quite alien to have what we call the task manager on the right-hand side and the disk drives on the left-hand side. So your applications on the right, devices on the left. Makes perfect sense to me because I'm a RISC OS user, that's fine. But to a Windows user, that is literally the flip of what they're used to seeing. And obviously that's a very easy mathematical translation to make. The window manager has a list of the icons and it knows what addresses they should be plotted on the screen. So if you just put a -1 in that equation, you should be able to flip the icon bar to the way round that some Windows user would be more used to it. So it's just little ways to try and capture when you're showing something to a user who's not familiar with RISC OS, to try and make it less daunting or less muscle memory that they're having to untrain. And then it was pointed out to me a while ago by Paolo, who may not be in it, I can't see in the dark yet. So Paolo pointed out that the title bar colour, which I'd never noticed, title bar colour is hardwired to black text in the title bar. So if you try and design a dark mode theme where all your windows have dark grey backgrounds, you can't see any of the writing anymore because it's all hardwired. So yeah, that is also, it's a thing, there's a line in the window manager where it is picking up the font colour and it passes it to the font manager to plot it. So it should be relatively simple to extend that so you can have any colour title bar text that you like. And therefore that would then make dark mode a possibility, which is, I know a lot of developers, people who use screens for 12 hours a day without blinking, they like to have dark mode because it's less strain on your eyeballs. And then some feedback from a user, we do note it is all written down, just go into a big melting pot, at the Wakefield show, was The question was, can I make the fonts in the desktop bigger? I think whether you have a problem with eyesight. And Steve said, oh yeah, of course you can. He just said, listen, let's type some stuff. And the font got smaller. Okay. That was the opposite of what we expected. So, yeah, essentially if you try and resize the desktop font, as in the one that is used in the window titles, for example, really you only get about kind of plus or minus 20% twiddle factor on the size of the font before it all goes pear-shaped. So, yeah, the ability to enlarge the font size without changing the resolution is a definite hole currently in what RISC OS can do. And I'm making a distinction there. I've seen a lot of confusion between size and resolution. Those are two different things. So if you have a 90 dpi desktop, which is what RISC OS normally boots up in, it will be a certain size. And if you measured with a ruler a window, and it was say 3 inches wide off the screen, if you were then to swap to 180 dpi, you should be able to get the same ruler and it will still measure 3 inches. So changing the desktop resolution should not change the size of the objects on the screen. That's changing their resolution. It's making them more finely detailed, but they should measure the same size with a ruler. So yeah, that's an important distinction, which in some cases RISC OS does not quite get right. If you change the resolution, you'll find the mouse pointer suddenly becomes tiny. There's a few things where, yeah, there's multiplies by 2 have got lost somewhere in translation because most of the time it's 90 dpi. Those were the main topics I was hoping to cover. If there's any questions that are about that or something that's a nice easy question I know the answer to, please ask.
In Windows 10,
so you can see who's asking.
In Windows 10, you can put the taskbar up the side. You've got a wide screen you can use. Is it possible to put the icon bar up the side?
Yes, not currently.
No.
No.
Put it bigger.
Yeah, in principle that is also just a mathematical translation. So the same as flipping is just sticking a -1 in the equation. I rotate and having it vertical. There's no particular reason why you couldn't have it vertical. I know Linux typically has the taskbar on the top. MacOS is at the bottom, I think. Yeah, I know you can drag it around quite easily. I'm also aware if you have a double monitor setup, there are variants on that. So you might want to have the icon bar duplicated on both screens, or split so that it's one massive long icon bar. So yeah, there are variations on a theme, and I think if I look at that with a purely mathematical hat on, they're just translations. They're nothing unusual. Yeah.
That's the thing about maths. One's only limited by what one can do with one's mind.
Yes. Yeah. Once you know the equation, yeah, it's a dangerous thing to know the equation. Yes.
Well, thank you very much.
No problem. Yeah.